Okay, chapter 3, last chapter. Using the system utilities. In security, this is living off the land. So most configurations you can get through settings. Settings is taking over the control panel. So if you're used to control panel, you'll need to get used to settings. That's what it looks like. I highly suggest getting familiar with this and using everything that's here and not so much the control panel, because my guess is either if it's not the next edition of Windows, it might be an update when they'll remove the control panel completely. You have all your same settings as you would in control panel. They just are sorted in a different way. But it is the control panel's new version, kind of like my Internet Explorer and Edge. So like, for example, within devices, you have all your devices, kind of like how Android and iOS have things divided out. Network and internet has everything that's in that realm, from Wi-Fi, airplane, VPN, Ethernet. Personalization handles the background, the colors, the lock screen. Your accounts, anything that you've connected out, like your Microsoft account. Time and language, pretty self-explanatory. Ease of access, your narrator, your magnifier, all that kind of stuff is hidden here, along with your mouse and keyboard. The privacy has what can run in the background, what can Microsoft send for diagnostic purposes. Updating security has your Windows Update, has your backup, has your activation, that kind of stuff. Your administrative tools. This is something that you should be familiar with. They are still found as the Microsoft Management Console. It has all the possible options to edit Windows. So things like the event viewer, the local security policy, the performance manager, the services, the task scheduler, any memory diagnostic. These are important tools that you need to be familiar with. In the control panel, they used to be under system security and then admin tools. You can also call them out by running the MMC itself. Definitely something that you need to be familiar with. It is a graphical user interface. It is not just based in text, although you can run it through the command line. Here is the computer management. Computer management tends to have everything that you need in order to do your work. So for example, the task scheduler, event viewer, shared folders, so on and so forth. All these items are already here under one roof. And then if you need to add more, you can add more snap-ins. That's what each of these is called. The computer management tends to have everything you need, from the disk to the services and so on, for you to use ready to go. Like I just said, you can make your own by adding snap-ins into a single console and then saving it later. You don't have to save it. You can't just create on the fly. There are different modes. So if for whatever reason a user needs access to them who's not an administrator, you can limit what they can see and do. Because ideally, you don't want users to have full access to the system and be able to make any and all changes that they want. Just in the couple slides before, you saw what the console looks like. You can choose a variety of items that most commonly used, the performance device manager, so on and so forth. Your service, these are background applications. This is what lets you get an IP address, to get DNS resolution, to print. These background services are essential to keep the computer running. if a service is running that's using a lot of CPU power and you don't know where it's coming from, you might want to check your services to see, is there something that shouldn't be running here that is running in the background? This is what it looks like. Here are some of the most common ones that you see in any Windows installation. You see the status, if they are running or not. You see, do they start up automatically or do they start when there's a trigger? Like if I'm going to print something, that's when the service activates because I'm going to print, otherwise it should stay off. And what user account do they use to run under? Are they running as a local system? Are they running as a network account, or are they running as a specific user? In the properties, you can define many items regarding each service. Like a service has to depend on another service to run. A lot of them run on Microsoft RPC. So if that's not running, a series of services won't be able to run. Hardware management handles the physical hardware of the system. This is where the device drivers communicate with the hardware and the operating system. Your device drivers are basically your translators between the hardware, the physical hardware, and the operating system and the programs that run within it. So you definitely want to make sure you have the proper drivers installed and that they're up to date. For example, if you have a 64-bit system, you shouldn't be running 32-bit drivers. You should run 64-bit because it's native to that operating system. All the drivers should have an INF file if you're looking for them. Nowadays, this is necessarily so much a problem because you get your drivers from Windows Update, which are already verified and run on the proper OS. So this isn't necessarily a big problem as it used to be. Some compatibility issues if you're upgrading from like XP, they won't be compatible. There are, like kernel mode printer drivers that used to exist in older versions. They won't run on this anymore. The device manager will tell you what devices are connected that Windows sees and it did install the right driver or there's a problem with it. May not give you the best explanation as to why something isn't running, but at least you can pinpoint to a specific piece of hardware. So some things that you can do, enabling, disabling, or uninstalling devices. You can change like the printing summaries. You can configure some advanced settings if they so exist. Here's the properties for the driver for a dual band AC wireless card. Your drivers should be signed, so you know that you're installing them from a valid source. The last thing you want is to install a driver that is from a sketchy place and you get yourself infected or worse. Windows does make a stink if you're trying to install a driver that hasn't been verified, which is good. This is a good thing. Even with our current modern systems, they still rely on direct memory access, on input-output ranges, on interrupt requests, because this is just how the hardware functions. So you will never get away from this kind of stuff. And this is generally what the BIOS and Windows together figure out, or how does a program access memory? What ways can we get information in and out? This used to be a thing. Most USB drivers now work universally. So you don't necessarily have to worry so much, but if something is asking, something that shouldn't be asking for a driver is asking for a driver, that to me would be a red flag, because maybe this device has been modified in a way that it installs something and now there's a back door. Power management is a feature of all modern OSs in order to minimize power usage. There are different states that you should be familiar with, like the S0, a fully functioning system, and S3 is suspended to RAM, whereas S4 is suspended to disk. S5, the OS isn't running. G3 is mechanically off. All the power has been turned off. Windows 10 uses a combo of S3 and S4 called hybrid. The advantage is if it loses power, it doesn't destroy everything. And it does enable the leaving to standby to enter into hibernation. Kind of a perk. Your modern standby, it provides that instant on as soon as you open up. If it's a laptop, you open up your screen, it comes back to life. You wiggle the mouse, it comes back. It's not necessarily off, but it's not necessarily on, but it is quick to answer back. There is an option called fast startup. So if a user logs off and hibernates, it can quickly resume instead of taking forever in a day to load. But if it does become unstable, and it's Windows, so it just might, you'll need to complete a restart in order to get everything back up and running. Here's your default power plans, the balance, the power saver, and the high performance, and this is what goes with each and every one of those. So if something is in high performance, it will never go to sleep and never hibernate. Whereas if it's balanced, it'll sleep after 30 minutes on an AC, but if it's on battery, it'll go to sleep after 15 minutes. The away mode is basically the S0 state. It looks like and sounds like it's off. Minimizing your device level power settings. You can use a command line to edit this, the powercfg.exe. Your display, which you are using if you're on Windows and you have a GUI running, has the display driver and DirectX. Windows 10, don't use Arrow Glass that you saw in Windows 7. Although some of those features still exist. You can do your standard things like changing your resolution and that kind of stuff, calibration. Here's some of the visual effects that you can edit. Desktop backgrounds, which we can all know how to change. Screensaver, same thing. To increase security, by the way, this is a good thing. You shouldn't just let the system let you log back in when you go into a sleep mode or when it locks. It should ask you for a password to log back in. This is a good thing. There's the option in the screensaver settings. Please make sure that that is on. You don't want someone jumping into your system after the fact because it wasn't logged in. Computers used to not support multiple logins or multiple monitors, sorry, but now they do. You can also use multiple desktops with a single monitor, kind of like Linux and Mac do. Windows copied them. You have the task scheduler to automate tasks when you want them. So at 10 o'clock restart or at 10 o'clock run this backup, run this program, this, that, or the other. You can do all that within Task Scheduler. PowerShell is something we will dig into further in the course. You should know how to use PowerShell. It is basically like the bash of Windows. You can do a number of scripts, automate a number of tasks. You can do more than what you can do with the command line in PowerShell. To me, it is weird because you have to use like get dash, set dash, or remove dash. It's a weird verb noun format, but you should know how to use PowerShell because you can get a lot of work done. You can automate a lot of work done by using PowerShell scripts. Each item that it can do is called a commandlet. So if you wanted to find out the IP address, it would be something like get IP address. And that commandlet has a certain way that it requests how you give it arguments and how it's going to work. Kind of like in Linux with Bash, every program has a certain way of functioning. And most Windows come with the ISE, or you can install the ISE in order to make edits to a PowerShell script, or you can also just do it in Notepad and then execute it. This is what the Windows PowerShell ISE looks like. Any questions? Cool. Then let's stop the recording.